Don't come to me to say, देखो जी मेरा कमीज तोड़ दिया. तोड़ दो जाके. Hey, you can teach history, no? So why don't you teach? So I said, what do you mean? I have to go, no? I have to go. Somebody has to teach them. So why don't you teach them? So I thought it was just for a lark. So I said, okay, I'll teach. मतलब ये भी तो इंसान है, ये भी तो कर रहा है, तो कर सकता है, तो फिर शायद हम भी कहीं सीख सकते हैं करना है. That is the kind of leadership you need to be teaching. Whatever is ordinary, no point. What is it that you are doing different? Saying that, sir, ये काम है, ये आप बताओ कैसे करना है, आप हमारे कंसल्टेंट बन जाओ. So Professor Patel said, okay, yes. I am Manoj Mathur. I am professor here at the Department of Architecture, SPA, New Delhi. And I have been here since 1975. First as a student, then as a visiting faculty, casual teacher, and then as a regular teacher since 1990. And I moved up the ranks from being assistant professor to associate professor, and now I am professor, and I am on the verge of now finally going out in a few months when I retire. SPA was not where I ever intended to come. I was very keen to become an architect. I was very keen to join an architecture course, but I had no idea that something like SPA existed, so I never applied here. And I was rejected. I did not get admission into all the places I tried, and therefore I had what you can call a gap year after my school. In that gap year, I was selected for the ITBHU, and I spent a year there doing civil engineering. And yet I didn't know about architecture at SPA. But what I was very clear about is that I did not want to continue at BHU to become a civil engineer. And therefore I dropped out of that, and I dropped out of that without doing all the formalities. And the formalities, of course, is that you have to formally inform the institution that you are dropping out. I did none of that, and I simply just came home and didn't intend to go back. And that's the interesting part of the story which begins now, is that having come home with no documents to prove whatever I had been, quite simply my mark sheet and my school leaving certificates, all of those were with the IIT BHU. I had nothing in my hand, and I had no intention of going there ever. So I had considered that they are lost forever and I need to have duplicates. And it was with that intention that I came to Delhi. I was not a resident of Delhi. I came to Delhi and I came to ITO for the simple reason that the CBI headquarters used to be at ITO. That building is now demolished. It used to be next to the WHO, which is also now going to be demolished, or partly, or already demolished. So I had come to that building to get my duplicate CBSE class 11 mark sheets. And I had waited all morning, and in those days it wasn't so easy. Everything had to be chased, everything. You had to persuade the people to do your work. And in that, what happened was that I didn't get my work done past lunchtime, and I was very hungry. And then somebody told me that you go to the WHO canteen, and why don't you have food? Because that building didn't have a proper any kind of canteen. So I went to the WHO canteen, which I found was too expensive, and there I was directed that, so what are you doing here? Why don't you go towards the ITO bus stops? That's where you'll get something nearby to eat. And that's when I spotted SPA. And when I spotted SPA, it was because the canteen of the planning department used to be where the office, the admin office and the accounts office is now. And that used to be a stilt area in which there was a kind of a semi-open canteen, and it was quite interesting. It had, first of all, it had very nice chairs, very avant-garde chairs, good-looking chairs and tables and so on. So I walked in through the gate. The SPA signboard was somewhere. I did not notice what it was. I just walked in through the gate. It was not like now, there was no guard or anything, it was just too informal a place. And I walked up inside this area, and I walked up to the counter. I got myself something to eat and something to drink. And that was all in my mind that I wanted to do. And yes, it was, I think it was end of June or something, so pretty hot. So this was a good shaded area, and I kind of lingered longer than I had intended. And that's when I discovered people walking in and out of this place with rolls of drawings stuck under their arms. And I was very curious what these people are doing, what they are, what do they have in their arms. And I asked casually, these are drawings, because I knew what drawings were. So yes, I got the answer that yes, these are drawings. And then I asked that what happens here, and that's when someone told me this is the School of Planning and Architecture. And that's when I discovered SPA. And that's when I said that, oh, but how does one get admission here? And that's when I was told that, well, the admission notice is not yet out. When it will come out, be on the lookout. And there's an exam, there's an entrance test. You sit for it, and yeah, that's how you get in here. So that's what happened. In the next few weeks, the notice came out, and I did the entrance test. And yeah, I think I was number 8 on that test. 30 people were selected at that time. So yeah, that's how I joined SPA. That's the beginning. And well, it was when I joined here. I joined in the hostel. The hostel here was a culture shock, because I had stayed 1 year at an engineering college hostel, which was an all-male hostel. So the first thing which happened here was that I found that there was a co-ed hostel, and unlike engineering college where girls used to be rare birds and they were known by their proper names, which were slightly different from their official names, here I found that half the population of that hostel was girls. So it was quite awkward, to say the least. I had studied in a co-ed school, definitely, but this was kind of a different co-ed, and also a different city, big city, metro, and a lot of people were here from the English medium, so English really was the lingua franca of this hostel, which again was very awkward for me. But what was something which I liked very much was the lack of hierarchy. So I had come from a hostel in which this business of saying sir, and then the sirs saying sir to their sirs, and this continuous chain of sirs was absolutely not here, and we were knowing people and interacting with them on first name basis, and as soon as their nicknames or pet names were revealed, we were using their nicknames. And then even when you had people who had graduated from SPA, They would come visiting a lot, and even they would be known by their nicknames, and they would even be introduced to us by their nicknames, and we would just interact with them in the same manner. So it was, yes, it is true that yes, the as a first year fresher, there are certain things that you need to understand, there are certain things that you need to get familiar with, and there are interesting ways in which that was done. Again, very different from what I had seen earlier. So practical jokes, pranks, this is how we learnt, and very soon we were into this community. The number was small and we were seeing the same faces day and night. So it was mostly like a family, and just like in a family, you have moments when you are best friends and you have moments when you are sworn enemies. So all of that was there. But the big thing was that there was a lot of camaraderie, there was a lot of helping each other, especially because what you were studying was so different from what would happen anywhere else. So I would say half the teaching would happen in the hostel, and slowly it became kind of clearly understood that, your hostel is your real school. So you did go to class because it was important, you did attend your lectures and you did attend your studios, but more or less it was all predicted, in the sense that when your seniors came to know, so who's going to be your student director? Oh, so and so, and who will be with him? So and so, and who will be teaching this subject, and who will be teaching that subject. You already were told what to expect. So it was like the lecture was not something which, ever surprised you. Or even in the studios, the comments, the critics that you got were like, okay, I know, next you're going to say this, I'm prepared with this, it's okay. So life was, I would say, the height of cool. It was very, very cool. And that's what was great here. Because what happened in the hostel extended to the school building as well. So it was just an equally friendly environment with all our teachers, including the very senior ones, and I would say finally including the most senior one. So the time I joined in first year, it was Professor Jhabwala, and he was completely the antithesis of a professor. I mean, he was more or less like a clown. So, and then of course the legend, all his stories about how he would be. And over time, one experienced all of them firsthand. So it was like he was like your pet entertainer in a way. And yes, because of that, you developed a different kind of respect. It was a very, I would say, a friendly respect. It was not in awe. So he was our professor. We had no clue what an eminent architect he was. It had no bearing on our relationship with him. He was just a terribly nice person, that's about all. And we would, first of all, the aspect that you could run to him for anything, he had brought it very, very clearly to us. Don't come for me for small things. If you have a fight with someone, you go and punch him back, no? If somebody has a fight and he kind of tears your shirt, and these words I remember so clearly, they are so funny. Don't come to me to say, देखो जी मेरा कमीज तोड़ दिया, तोड़ दो जाके. So this kameez tod diya is something which stuck with me, that all these petty matters don't really make a difference. You just take care of them. You have something really problematic, you come to me and I'll solve it. So it made your life in a different place, different kind of college, as I said, different kind of hostel, different kind of city. It made that life so much easier. So almost beautiful. It was like that. And then we had our teachers, and at that time it was something like the time we are having now. I'm talking to you on the 28th of March 2022, and we have had a induction of very many young interesting people after a long time as regular faculty. And when I joined, it was something like that. So at that time we had a lot of young people as teachers who had passed out from SPA and from other places not very long ago, and some of them had come back from abroad and some of them had started their own practice. So it was very exciting because they had lots of different things to share with us, and it was a very healthy mix of what goes on out in the world of practice, what is going on out there in the bigger world, outside of the country from where they had done their masters and they had come back. And in all that, the fact that so many of them were from SPA itself, they were just no different from what I said, what are called the super seniors now. And almost to the point where even with them we would converse in their first names or nicknames. So it was, it would have been really, I would say, odd and perhaps downright insulting to any of those of our teachers if we had addressed them as, Professor so and so, can you please? Probably they won't even look back to answer you because they won't know that they were being addressed. That was not the way it happened at that time. And therefore, again, in the field of learning new things, it was very easy. So that initial setback which you get when you are learning totally new things and do not know how to go forward, so you would get to know about those things in the daytime in the college, and then the hostel would be like a tutorial class after college and after dinner, in fact, when what happened during the day would be part of the conversation, and you could bring out things. No, this is what happened, and he told me like this. So, is it real? Does it really happen? Have I understood it correctly? What did he mean? All of those things would be discussed in those hours, in those early hours, because sleeping before 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock was like not done. You would really thrash out lots of things in your life, in your education, in your what's happening in your studio, how are you performing. All of those things would get thrashed out. We didn't have any other social media. Our social media was real socializing. So we discussed everything there, and occasionally we would have our parties, which now have become almost a ritual in the hostel. It was not ritualistic like that. You would just have them impromptu. And being small in number, everybody was invited, everybody joined, and then lots of crazy things were done, which, okay, I'd rather not talk about it. Oh, we used to, playing pranks was a very, very important part of our lives, and we used to have these hostel rooms which had ventilators on top. So private people who were not very inclined to socialize always got some message through the ventilator of some kind or the other. Sometimes it was even an explosive message. Those kind of things we used to do. And yes, one of the big occasions in the hostel always was somebody's parents' parcel, you know. So in my case, for some reason, actually I know the reason, in my case it was called the Trolley. And of course my name being Manoj, I was called Manu. So Manu ki trolley aa gayi, Manu ki trolley aa gayi would happen. Manu ki trolley would come because my parents were living in Agra at that time, and often so many people would be toing and froing. So every time somebody would come from Agra to Delhi, I would get a little bag of goodies. And so that word would go around, Manu ki trolley aa gayi, and slowly everybody would descend in the hostel foyer, and within minutes Manu ki trolley would be all would vanish, and I would just be left with the bag to carry to my room, almost like that. So that kind of environment, that kind of sharing, that kind of being with each other was, it was the way that we did it. And of course there was a time when we actually did move from the hostel because of this population explosion. Many more people were coming in, and I think it was 1979 or 80 when we actually moved to the college building, top floor. That's where the hostel was properly made. We had a properly made hostel. For a long time, I think if you went to the top floor, you would still find the tiles of the toilets made at that time, and people would wonder why there are tiles in the studio. So there used to be a hostel at that time here, and starting with a culture where in the final year or at the time of the final submission, everybody would camp in the studio. You would make a little shack for yourself in the studio, and you would actually stay there. It was like an expedition. You would stay there. So this was when the hostel moved here, final year students were moved here, so it became formalized. But I think that shack experience was much better because you actually made your shack with everything, waste stuff that you could find all over the building. So you actually did that, that junkyard which is at the back. You would go there and pick things which you think you could make your shack with. So we used to have these big tables, and the big tables would have these foot bars at the bottom, and the trick was how to convert, using those foot bars, how to make a bed under the table. That used to be the big thing. And the number of tables that you could gather for yourself, or rather commandeer for yourself, meant that many more helpers you could have, because that many more bed arrangements you could have under the tables. So when I finally got to do my thesis, I had a very big compliment of people who wanted to help. I don't know why. Probably they thought that, at least this time let's push this guy out of college, whatever was their idea. But I had a lot of help doing my thesis, and all this was thanks to my high priority that I wanted 5 tables in my shack. It was the grandest shack of all. And that would be the way I would work in the daytime. Help would come from all over. People who are working, they would come to help. People who are students, juniors, they would come to help. And they would help at night time when I would sleep. So in the hostel, actually, that shift from being a student, to a teacher is almost like a natural process. Like I said, when you are in the hostel, your seniors are already your impromptu teachers. They are guiding you all the time. They are helping you. They are giving you grits. They are getting even emotional about how bad work you are doing. They get really worked up about this fact. So all of this is part of that hostel growing up. And one other important part of the hostel growing up is that during exams you do joint study. So it would be like when you are in a group, you are a particular class, particular batch, then everybody had their sort of duties assigned, that you prepare this subject and you brief everybody else about it. Next morning they will just do the exam and that will be end of it. Everybody does not have to study everything else. Okay, so that was one thing which was very helpful in developing this idea of how to teach. I think most important for a teacher is not really how much you know, how much you're learned or how much you're qualified, but the important part in teaching is how to teach. So especially when you're teaching people who are your colleagues and who can always talk back to you and who can always tell you, but what you're saying now is not correct, or what you're saying now is not what I remember was taught in class. So you're doubly careful. So to be able to explain things very clearly and to actually not rely on just simple what is heard before or you read somewhere, but to check it from all corners, make sure that you're saying the right thing. That aspect is very important. And then you go ahead and you say that yes, there are many things about this subject that need to be learned, but these are the 5 things, if you know, the rest can follow, to kind of be able to extract the juice of the topic and to convey that. So that training I got in the hostel itself. For some reason or the other, it happened to be that I was chosen by my batchmates as the history tutor. Just happened like that. I was not particularly interested in history. We used to have actually history twice of what we have now, because there were 2 stalwarts teaching us history and none of them was willing to concede space to the other. So we used to have one subject which was called History of Architecture Western, and there was Rosemary Sachdev would teach us history outside of India, which was mainly European history. So she was talking to us about all those subjects, about Greek, Roman and early Christian and Byzantine, Romanesque and Gothic and Renaissance, and all of those things were Rosemary Sachdev's topics. And then we had Satish Grover, who was the master of the Indian and Buddhist, Hindu, all of those things, Islamic particularly. So he was the master of that. Now, Rosemary's classes, I found them very difficult because of her accent. I was not so good at, her way of speaking English. First of all, she was Australian, so that itself was an added difficulty. And then her intonation and everything. Basically, what I'm trying to confess rather, is that I slept through most of our classes. And she was always teaching with slides, and the room would be dark, and therefore it was very easy to do that. Which meant, and this is the important point, which meant that all of the study for Rosie is how we used to call her. Rosie's subject had to be done by me all over again. I had no notes. It had to be done by me all over again by actually going and getting books from the library. So that is one subject I can say that I actually read, because I was not there in class. And from that reading is where I developed my own understanding of the so-called Western history, and I explained to my colleagues, my batchmates, in that way. And sometimes it would come up, there would be some kind of a discord between what I would tell them and what Rosie would have said, because I would have got my books, I would have got different books to refer, and Rosie would have shown slides of different buildings, and therefore the examples which she would talk about may not have been the examples which I would tell them, and they would say, but how can you say that? Rosie didn't show any slide of that. So anyway, I said, no, it's not important to know the names of the right examples, just go with, the funda of it. So in a way, it was very helpful for me, because I kind of had to get to the bottom of it. And that's how my interest in teaching history began. And word got around, you can say. Word got around that, I do that quite well. And then finally, when Rosemary stopped teaching here, then that subject teaching was passed on to one of our seniors, who was now a teacher by this time, Nalini Thakur. And Nalini Thakur was given the task of teaching Western history. And Nalini Thakur taught Western history, I think, for a couple of years. And then she was to go to the UK, University of York, to do her, I don't know whether it was the master's or a PhD, but she had to go abroad. And this going abroad typically would happen, a month or so down the line after the semester here started. So she'd started the semester in the hope that by the time she has to leave, the department will find some replacement for her. But the department is the department. The replacement for her was not found, and then it kind of became almost a condition for Nalini's departure for the UK, that you have to find a replacement. If you don't find a replacement, you're not going. And so almost as a last resort, Nalini asked me, hey, you can teach history, no? So why don't you teach? So I said, what do you mean? Said, I have to go, no? I have to go. Somebody has to teach them. So why don't you teach them? So I thought it was just for a lark. So I said, okay, I'll teach. By the time I was, where was I? I was in the 5th year. I had not yet actually, no, I think I had done my thesis. I had graduated, I had graduated by that time. And so therefore the students who I had to teach were not the students I had known. And so there was some kind of distance was there. And I started teaching them, and I enjoyed it to the hilt. And I taught for the entire semester. And I didn't get any payment for it, because I was not eligible to become visiting faculty. So my starting off as a teacher actually happened just by chance. Just like my being an architect from SPA happened just by chance, my journey as a teacher was also just by chance. And then soon enough, I think at the end of that semester, I had completed 2 years after graduation, which was the minimum requirement for a visiting faculty then. And so I got in as visiting faculty, taking history lectures, Western history lectures. Something whose classes I had not attended. I had slept through those classes, and I was teaching precisely that. So this is the kind of, ironic things which keep on happening here. And I was teaching for quite some time, almost 7-8 years, during which time I got to know many faculty here, senior faculty here. I was then drafted into the construction studio, drafted into the design studio. In the construction studio, I was teaching with one of my teachers, and one of those teachers who we actually were fearful of, not in any other sense, but that he would absolutely trash our drawings, and he would absolutely trash us, throw us out of the class if we were not dressed properly. So that was Rasik Behel. Rasik Behel was a terror in this regard. You had to be bathed, shaved, and you had to put on a clean shirt. These were absolute requirements in the studio. So his thinking was that, if you are not even looking proper, how will you even snare a client? I mean, the client will treat you like a laborer and shoo you off. So if you are to be learning to become an architect, you have to become presentable, and the first thing to be presentable is yourself. And then your drawings have to be presentable. No stray dirt marks or pencil marks or anything like that. The drawing has to be absolutely clean, black and white, sharp lines. We were making drawings by hand at that time. So all the joints, lines must intersect properly. There shouldn't be any gaps. All of that drafting had to be superb. Your format had to be superb. Only then he would consider looking at your drawing and checking out your detail. And he was the kind of person who would start his studio by actually making a complete drawing on the blackboard by hand, drafting with chalk without any instruments. Straight line across the board, straight perpendiculars, straight border, format. He would actually do all of that. I mean, it was a very, very, very hard act to follow, but it was also very inspiring. मतलब ये भी तो इंसान है, ये भी तो कर रहा है, तो कर सकता है, तो फिर शायद हम भी कहीं सीख सकते हैं करना. That is the kind of leadership you need to be teaching. So this leading from the front, leading by example, not allowing any kind of concession, that was the big thing. He won't allow any leeway in this. ऐसा होना है तो ऐसे ही होना है, almost like military. So he was like that. So that was one thing which was very inspiring in terms of preparation to teach. Another was Professor Chaya. So Professor Chaya, rest in peace, passed away last year. Rasik Bell a few years before that. Professor Chaya was always about questioning. Whatever is ordinary, no point. What is it that you are doing different? ये ऐसा क्यों है? लेकिन ये ऐसा क्यों नहीं हो सकता? He was a absolutely, totally argumentative person. You could argue with him forever and not win, because he would out-argue you. So that was another quality, one very, very important quality, that you are not going to do anything, you're not going to have any movement forward till you decide to disrupt. Whatever is the status quo, if you disrupt it, then you create the space for something new to happen, otherwise not. So I did a couple of housing studios with him, which were great experiences in learning. It helped to actually understand a lot of things from a very different perspective. He was not from the SPA. He was from MSU, Vadodara, and then he was teaching at IIT Kharagpur. and he had been handpicked by Professor Jhabwala to come to Delhi. There were other circumstances why he had to move from there, and so he was here in Delhi, and his way of doing things was very different. And then there was Vinod Gupta, who is still most people today call him Dr. Vinod Gupta, but somehow it just doesn't come off my tongue. So because he was Vinod forever, and he had come back from Denmark at that time, and I mean he was a repository of all kinds of exciting information. And this is, I'm talking about the first year, which is the formative time. It's almost, I would say, that in the first few weeks of the first year, I mean, it was like wondering, okay, what is he going to come up with next? So today, everything that you can say are the topical things: environment, ecology, pollution, food shortage, hydroponics, lightweight structures, you name it. These are things which Vinod Gupta introduced to us in the first 4 months of our architecture. What an opening up of the brain it was. And that, I would say, was very, very important, because those were the things which one carried right through the years when we were doing architecture. And finally, when I got to be a teacher, I would always, he was like a, उसको क्या कहते हैं वो कसौटी, like what do you call कसौटी, something. But it was always like I was always touching there, that do I measure up till that or don't I? How would he do it? What would he think of? How would he present this topic? How would he introduce this subject? So those learnings are very important. If you get to learn from the right people who actually know how to teach, then you can become a teacher. Otherwise, you can become an expert at your subject. Okay, you can know a lot of things about your subject, and probably when people are just looking for an answer which is related to the subject, there's no better person who can give that answer. But teaching is different. To be a teacher, you have to actually become a student. You have to see things from the perspective of the student. Where is the student coming from? What does the student know? What is the level from which the student is trying to rise up? How much can the student absorb? How much of a dosage that you can give to a student at a particular time? And how much can you grind that subject? So there's a time when you say, okay, for now, this much is enough. Let's change the topic. Let's talk about something else. That's also a very important quality. So those are the things which helped in formulating an idea of what kind of a teacher you're going to be. So that was one part of you can say my career, that I was teaching, and I was enjoying teaching, but never did I think that I would become a faculty here. And that was because I had practice going on. This practice had already started even before I had completed my graduation. This practice was started with some of my seniors, and I was given an ultimatum by my partners that now we are coming to a stage where we have to kind of formally, present our brochures and all that. And we cannot have this situation where we say that one of our partners is not an architect. So I was literally forced, no, you go back to school and you complete your thesis, and only then you come back. And this was already when we were in practice for about 2 years. So they say ki this 4 months time we are giving you, you go and you do your thesis and you come back, and then we will have you in the practice. So in a way you can say that again I got this because the circumstances were such. In terms of what was the profession, what kind of things we started doing. So the idea that you need to be, Chaya's words, that you need to be looking at it from first principles. Chaya was very methodical himself. He actually would conduct a course on design methodology, which incidentally now I am doing, and I am trying to emulate him with the third year students. It's been reintroduced. It had gone missing. That particular subject had gone missing from our curriculum for a couple of decades, and now it's come back. So when you're trying to be different, when you're trying to do something from scratch, it always helps when you are young, and it always helps that you are not an expert, because when you are not an expert, that's when you can hope to become an expert. If you're already an expert, then nothing matters, because you're already an expert. Why do you need to learn more? Your work will go on. So when you are not an expert, then you want to explore. That's when you want to find out, do different things, learn new things. And so in practice, we did, in the initial years, we did a couple of big projects which were not something which anyone could hope for. So it was like a godsend that we got those projects. We had no idea how to do them. We had not done anything like that in the school before. It was not none of our projects in the school had been a hospital. And that's the project, you can say, that was a launch project. We started off, I practiced wrong. And we started doing the design in exactly the same way that we would do in college. So there was a brief, then we changed that brief, we discussed with the clients, we told them that this is part of the brief, but you really think, it's to be like this, which the answer to that they did not have. Then a committee was formed, and they appointed a consultant specially to look at the brief and rework it with us, which later on went on to become the standard there in that organization. And then we talked to a lot of the users, simply because we didn't know what to do. We talked to a lot of users कि क्या करते हो आप, कैसे करते हो, ये करते हो तो कैसे करते हो, और आपको क्या क्या चाहिए होता है. और जब ब्रीफ में ये लिखा हुआ है, so this is only the room size, what will happen in this, what do you do. We went to different other hospitals to look at people, what they were doing. We found some better examples than the brief, and there were some examples which were really bad, gave us an idea of what not to do. And then we did this hospital design, which even today, I would say, when was this? This would have been somewhere in 1984 or 85. So even after so many years, I would say it's still a very inventive design. And there was something in that we did which just came naturally to us. And now particularly, I'm not going to talk much more about it, because I suddenly got an idea talking to you. And I'm wondering if I should go ahead. But I know designs never get patented. But the principle of it, I'm surely going to explore how to patent it. Because at that time, it just came naturally to us, and we did it. And then we did it in another project, another hospital project. And ever since we have been doing hospital project in that practice, till when I was a part of it, we have applied that, and nowhere else I have seen any other architect try it even. Which of course is very disappointing for me, because I would have thought that any architect who actually invests some time, invests some brains in thinking about it, will come up with that solution as the most obvious, logical, natural one. And nowhere I have found it in all of these years. So I think there is something there which can become patented. So anyway, that was the way we used to work at that time. In this particular first project that I am talking about, as I said, we didn't know anything, and particularly we didn't know anything about how to have consultants, how to get associates for the structures, for the air conditioning, for the electrical. So what did we do? We went to our teachers. So Professor Patel taught us structures, and we went to Professor Patel saying that, sir, ये काम है, ये आप बताओ कैसे करना है, आप हमारे कंसल्टेंट बन जाओ. So Professor Patel said, okay, yes. Dr. P.C. Jain taught us the air conditioning. We went to him saying that, Dr. Jain, we don't know any air conditioning. You have taught us, but still. So हॉस्पिटल की एयर कंडीशनिंग तो थोड़ी ज़्यादा ही होती है, तो आप बताओ कैसे करना है, आप हमारे कंसल्टेंट बन जाओ. सो दैट्स द वे वी स्टार्टेड आवर फर्स्ट लॉन्च प्रोजेक्ट with who were the top-notch consultants in their fields in our first project. And that, I think, was another big thing, because we learned what is the ask. Because once you're working with the top-notch consultants, then you get to know what is the level of the service which can be provided. And here there was a kind of a double jeopardy, in the sense that they were being consultants to their own students, right? So whatever they did had to be absolutely model. It was like, we taught you this in class, and this is how it is really being done here. No shortcuts. Everything done absolutely the way, you could say, at one time you could say, oh, that is all class, that's all theoretical, practice mein aisa thodi hota hai. But here they were consultants to their own students, so they were doing everything by the book. सब चीज हमको इतनी बढ़िया डिटेल में मिली, और हमने उससे इतना सीखा. So there again is a lesson that you may not know everything. It's not even necessary. But if you associate with good people who do good work, more than anything else, they give you the chance to learn and improve your work. So in those projects, we were absolutely clear that, sir, we are getting full architect's fees, and we are your students, but in no way, please let this come into your mind that you have to give us any concession. You charge us your full fees. Okay? हमने पता नहीं कितनी गलतियां उसमें करी होंगी. I don't know how many times we must have repeated our drawings, because we would do something and then Dr. Jain would say, but you have not considered this at all, what about that? And then when you have something like that, when you have people like that, then they actually they help you to give the bigger picture. So when Dr. Jain would give us a crit, he would give us a crit on hospital design, not on air conditioning of hospital. He would give us an overall crit, that this is like this, but for this, there's some electrical stuff also to be tackled, and there's some plumbing stuff to be also tackled. Okay? And then what kind of lift lobbies you have made, your stretcher is not done. All those things he would tell us, simply because he's so experienced. So our early years in practice were just as much of a learning as the college was, probably even more. And it was also the time when, as a nation, as a country, and certainly as a capital city of the country, a lot of things were being done for the first time. So we just happened to be the kind of people who clients would usually pick up, because they found in us that some architect who was doing this kind of project for the first time. Normally you would say clients would pick up some architect because they had done some project of this kind before. आपने ये पहले किया है, अच्छा तो ठीक है, then we will give you a project. For us, it just happened the other way, that we would meet up with clients who would be very happy to give us the project. Have you done this kind of thing before? And you would say, sorry, I mean that's not our strength. हमने तो कभी किया नहीं है. And for some reason, they would see in us architects who were willing to work with them, to discover with them, to move in the direction in which they thought things should go. So just like I talked about this hospital, another typology is what is called, today again there's a big news in the papers, what's called the PVR. Okay, so the PVR, what is basically a multiplex cinema, was, again, we were in a place where obviously we had not designed any PVR, there hadn't been anyone before that, but we were just youngsters who got introduced to this very young client, and who were willing to absolutely go into the depth of it and see where it works, how it doesn't work, to travel along with him to various places to see things for ourselves, work out, present different options. So that again became something which was a great learning experience for us. And I think in practice, as long as you are learning something new, you are vibrant. The moment you stop being vibrant is when you become a shop. And then there are better ways to become a shop. You can actually open a ice cream parlor or a juice bar, and you'll earn actual money out of that because it's just a shop. So for me, the essence of practice is being at the top of your game. And the essence of practice is being inventive all the time, of taking the same old project, the same old typologies, the same common brief, and finding for yourself a question in that. If we go for hospitals, you can say that a hospital is a hospital, and if there is a good way a hospital can be designed, then why can't all the hospitals be same? And certainly if you are designing hospitals for a particular organization, they are putting it in different places, you can say there can be a standard plan, you can put it everywhere. But if with every iteration you can come to a point that, okay, let's go back to the previous thing and see where the compromises were made, and this time let's try to eliminate at least one compromise, make it better, make it efficient. If that is how you are progressing, then you are in practice. That is my, you can say, my mantra.